Did you see Elon Musk is now going to war with a judge in Brazil
over being asked to ban X users? Things have gone so far as employees at X are being threatened with jail time just for working at the company.
It seems like a problem for Brazil, especially for Elon Musk's employees, right?
But if you care about human rights, you'd also want to widen that circle to the thousands of Brazilian internet users, folks who spoke out against government censorship or just wanted to use non-government approved apps.
Everyone is getting the censorship ban hammer there. From big names like Brazil's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, think of him as Brazil's Trump, and Bruno Aib, a very popular podcaster. Think of him as their Joe Rogan of sorts, and many thousands of other everyday folks.
How does one have a functioning democracy when a judge can just censor anyone who disagrees with them?
And if that's still not enough to raise your concern, consider the hundreds of thousands of everyday users of Telegram, a peer-to-peer encrypted messaging app, who can no longer access it in Brazil because it's banned.
Even then, you might reasonably say, but that's in Brazil. What's that got to do with me here in America? But what if our government here in the USA were a participant in this whole censorship regime in South America? You're paying for it. You should probably know about it.
To really understand this, you need to connect the dots between various leaks, subpoenaed emails, and documents and testimony from experts in cybersecurity.
Specifically about the hearts and minds work intelligence agencies do to influence public opinion abroad that has now been turned on our domestic populations and allies.
According to Mike Benz, a former State Department employee and cybersecurity expert, some tools and methodologies for manipulating mass opinion were first deployed to encourage the Arab Spring. If you remember, the Arab Spring was primarily covered in Western media as a sudden, popular uprising in the Middle East against various dictatorships across the region.
The story goes that they were inspired by a man in Tunisia who lit himself on fire after being shaken down for his fruit stand by local police.
No doubt, long-standing problems with the autocratic regimes legitimately fueled the Arab Spring.
However, according to Benz, the intelligence apparatus chose the targets of where the Arab Spring took off the biggest, poured the fuel on the fire to increase the temperature and determine how long it lasted. Regimes like Egypt, for example, would collapse under the effort.
He also claimed that this worked alongside traditional, on-the-ground color revolution tactics.
According to the CTIL files, as reported by Michael Schellenberger's Public, by 2016, after Brexit and the election of Donald Trump, which freaked them out, tools would go into creation or be turned on the populations of the West.
By 2017, the U.S. Department of Defense, the CIA, the Department of Homeland Security, later through CISA,
the National Science Foundation, and the British Ministry of Defense
started the development of social media censorship tools for their own populations.
All of this was done ostensibly to fight
dis, and malinformation under the auspices of the new Orwellian term, cognitive security.
Visualizing all the ideas in society into a singular asset for the government to protect and direct in the correct ways.
Yes, managed democracy.
Of course, they wouldn't tell us that. The public justification was to prevent Iran from confusing Americans when Election Day happens.
The private justification made clear in every leak, report, testimony, release, and FOIA request from the Twitter files, Facebook files, and now the CTIL and the Brazil X files
was the rise of populist figures.
Populist movements scared the elite, who now feel the need to control the narrative on the internet for their sake and our own.
This is precisely how the dynamic is playing out in Brazil as well.
Supreme Court Justice Moraes of Brazil justifies his censorship regime by claiming, quote, "It is necessary, appropriate, and urgent to stop the possible spread of hate speech, subversion of order, and the encouragement to break institutional and democratic normality by blocking accounts on social networks."
So, how did the censorship regime wind up in Brazil? In 2019, Brazil's Supreme Court granted itself new powers to, quote, act as an investigator, prosecutor, and judge, all at once in some cases.
Rather than normal processes of division of powers, the Supreme Court picked the lead of the election court. The judicial branch in Brazil manages their elections, a guy named Moraes, who, according to the U.S. investigations, ordered the federal police of Brazil to raid 10 addresses tied to social media users who had criticized the court.
And that's just the beginning. Here's a few more examples.
Judge Moraes was being investigated by a magazine at the time for corruption, with the man who appointed him to this special censorship privilege.
Additionally, 5 known members of the journalism community, former judges, and law professors who criticized the constitutionality of these acts were also banned off social media.
David Agape, also writing for Public, revealed that the FBI also met in secret with the election authorities, TSE, in Brazil as far back as 2018 and until the highly consequential 2022 election in which the
Trump of Brazil, Bolsonaro, lost and the current left-wing president won.
What happened at these meetings and seminars, you might ask?
The supposed justification was the belief that the only reason the populist Bolsonaro could have won in 2018 was because of some foreign actor, maybe China or Russia or someone else, were influencing the election.
So the people of Brazil made the wrong choice on fake information, supposedly. This evolved to simply, quote, fighting misinformation online, mainly with the support of the corporate news media in Brazil, in part influenced by foreign NGOs like the Soros Open Society Foundation,
which has given $22 million to Brazilian organizations, all of which push for censorship.
Sounds awfully familiar to anyone in America who has been paying any attention.
And I want to note, this wouldn't be the first time the US supported a coup d'etat in Brazil. It is well established that the CIA secretly funded Brazilian journalists, which backed the 1964 military coup of Brazil. So what does this all mean for Americans?
Well, it appears if you take the public record of what we know seriously, that our government is engaged in a global censorship regime to control the levers of power all over the world, to keep democracy from functioning or any challenge to the global status quo from arising, our government has created a global censorship industrial complex,
silencing dissent in Brazil, Ireland, the UK, and America, hosting, quote, cognitive warfare summits at NATO conferences and spending hundreds of millions, perhaps billions of our dollars to do it.
There is a global cabal of elites who are trying to control what you can think and what you are allowed to say.
First Amendment be damned, let that sink in.
You don't live in a free country.
And if you leave America today, wherever you go, it will also be a part of this regime because it's global.
There is no place to run to, but that doesn't mean we have to give up. Don't let them win.
Do not let the hero in your soul perish in lonely frustration.
The world you desire, where you are free to speak your mind without the approvals of bureaucrats and censors, can be won.
It is possible, and it is yours if you only dare to speak up.
And if you don't want to speak, support our speech by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video with a friend before they say